The autumn sun cast long shadows across the Pentagon Memorial as crowds gathered for the 24th anniversary of the September 11th attacks. Among them stood Howard Gaines, a 73-year-old veteran with stooped shoulders and weathered hands. His grey hair was neatly combed, and his navy blazer, adorned with a single modest pin, hung slightly loose on his thinning frame. Howard checked his invitation again, running a finger over the embossed Department of Defense seal. After all these years, they had finally tracked him down, sending a formal request for his attendance at this year's ceremony. The letter mentioned honoring all who served during our nation's darkest hour, though it made no specific reference to his actions that day. As he approached the security checkpoint, a young military police officer raised his hand. "Invitation and ID, sir." Howard produced both with a polite smile. "Beautiful morning for the ceremony." The officer barely glanced at the invitation before frowning at Howard's driver's license. "Sir, this invitation is for distinguished guests and first responders. I don't see your name on our verified list." "There must be some mistake," Howard said, his voice steady but uncertain. "I received this directly from the Pentagon Office of Commemorations. Perhaps under military personnel?" The officer's expression hardened as he called over his supervisor, a stern-faced woman with captain's bars. "Sir, this area is restricted to officially recognized responders and dignitaries," she stated, her voice carrying to those waiting in line behind Howard. "Your invitation appears legitimate, but your name isn't in our system." Howard lowered his voice. "I was here that day, September 11th. I worked in the building." The captain sighed with visible impatience. "Sir, many people worked at the Pentagon. This ceremony is specifically for recognized heroes and dignitaries. Without proper clearance, I'll have to ask you to move to the public viewing area." A murmur ran through the crowd. Howard felt heat rising in his cheeks as people turned to stare. "There's been a misunderstanding," Howard insisted quietly. "I received a personal invitation." "Anyone can claim that, sir," the captain said loudly. "We have strict protocols." A well-dressed man behind Howard cleared his throat. "Some of us have actual credentials and appointments with the secretary. Could you move this along?" The captain nodded. "Sir, please step aside. The public viewing area is around the corner." Howard's hands trembled slightly as he collected his ID. "I was in the Naval Command Center when the plane hit," he said, his voice barely audible. "I pulled 7 people out before the section collapsed." The captain's expression didn't change. "If that were documented, sir, you'd be on our list. Please move along." As Howard reluctantly stepped away, the man behind him muttered, "Another attention seeker. Every year they come out of the woodwork." Howard's ears burned as he clutched his invitation. He moved slowly toward the public area, his arthritic knee protesting with each step. 24 years ago, he had run through smoke-filled corridors without feeling any pain. Now, each dismissive glance felt like a physical blow. In the public viewing section, Howard found a seat at the back. From this distance, the speakers at the podium were barely visible. He watched as various officials and recognized heroes took their designated seats in the front rows. A young woman sat beside him, noticing his invitation. "They turned you away?" she asked. Howard nodded, embarrassment still fresh. "A mix-up with the list." "Are you a family member?" she asked gently. "No," he replied, unwilling to explain further. He tucked the invitation into his pocket, wishing he had never come. The ceremony began with a color guard and national anthem. Howard stood with his hand over his heart, his thoughts drifting back to that Tuesday morning. The deafening roar, the building shuddering, the acrid smoke that burned his lungs as he crawled through debris, calling out for survivors. The current Secretary of Defense approached the podium. Howard recognized him from news coverage, a decorated veteran himself, now the youngest person to hold the office. The secretary began his address, speaking of sacrifice and duty. Meanwhile, at the security checkpoint, a flustered aide rushed toward the captain. "We have a problem," he said, holding a tablet. "There was an error in the system. Some of the 2001 responders weren't properly uploaded to the verification database." The captain frowned. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we may have turned away actual 9/11 responders," the aide replied, scrolling through names, "including a Howard Gaines, who according to these records was personally requested by the secretary." The captain's face paled. "Find him, now." Back in the public section, Howard listened as the secretary spoke about heroes who never sought recognition, about ordinary people who, when faced with extraordinary circumstances, revealed their true character. "Some of the greatest heroes of that day remain unknown to the public," the secretary said, "their stories untold except in classified reports and the memories of those they saved." Howard closed his eyes, remembering voices crying out in the darkness. The weight of a young sailor as he carried her through a collapsed passageway. The searing pain as a falling beam struck his back. He didn't notice the commotion at the edge of the seating area, where the captain and several aides were scanning the crowd, tablet in hand. The Secretary of Defense continued his address, his voice carrying across the memorial grounds. "Today, I want to speak about a particular kind of courage, the kind that doesn't seek the spotlight, the kind that acts and then disappears back into ordinary life." He paused, scanning his notes before looking up at the assembled crowd. 24 years ago, when American Airlines Flight 77 struck this building, many ran out, but some ran in. One such individual was a naval intelligence officer who had served his country in Vietnam before joining the Pentagon as a civilian analyst. Howard sat up straighter, a chill running through him. According to after-action reports that remained classified until recently, this individual was documented as entering the impact zone 7 separate times, helping to evacuate personnel who were trapped or disoriented. On his final entry, despite suffering from smoke inhalation and a serious back injury, he carried a young communications specialist nearly 200 yards to safety. The secretary paused, taking a sip of water. What makes this story remarkable is what happened next. This individual declined medical attention until all others were treated. He provided critical information to first responders about building layout and potential survivors. And then, in the chaos of that day, he simply left. No interviews, no recognition sought. He submitted his report through proper channels and continued his work from a temporary location during the Pentagon's reconstruction. Howard's heart pounded in his chest. Nobody was supposed to know these details. He had done his duty and filed his report as regulations required. What happened that day had haunted his dreams for years. He had no desire to revisit it publicly. We have since learned that this individual suffered career-long complications from injuries sustained that day. A back injury that never fully healed. Respiratory issues from smoke exposure. Yet he never applied for compensation or recognition. The secretary looked down at his notes again. Ladies and gentlemen, it was my intention today to finally recognize this individual with the Defense Department's highest civilian honor. However, I've just been informed of an inexcusable administrative error. A murmur ran through the crowd. The gentleman in question was sent an invitation, but was turned away at our security checkpoint due to a database omission. The secretary's voice hardened with controlled anger. This is not how we honor our heroes. The captain, who had been searching the public seating area, finally spotted Howard and hurried toward him, followed by 2 aides. Howard noticed them approaching and felt a fresh wave of embarrassment. He wanted nothing more than to disappear. "Mr. Gaines," the captain whispered urgently, bending down. "Sir, I need you to come with me immediately." Howard shook his head slightly. "I believe I've been embarrassed enough for one day, Captain." "Sir, the secretary is speaking about you right now," she insisted. "There was a terrible mistake. Your name was omitted from the security database. We need to get you to the stage immediately." Howard looked toward the podium where the secretary had paused his speech. Their eyes met across the distance, and the secretary gave an almost imperceptible nod. "I don't want any fuss," Howard whispered. "Sir," the captain said, her earlier brusqueness replaced with genuine regret, "the secretary has halted the entire ceremony until this error is corrected. Please." With reluctance, Howard stood, his knee protesting sharply. The captain offered her arm for support, which he declined with a shake of his head. As they moved toward the front, Howard became acutely aware of the eyes following him, the whispers, the curious stares. At the checkpoint that had rejected him earlier, a different atmosphere prevailed. The officers stood at attention, their earlier suspicion replaced by deference. An aide handed the captain a small box, which she carried as they approached the ceremonial area. The secretary had stepped away from the podium and was waiting at the edge of the stage. As Howard approached, the secretary descended the steps to meet him personally. "Mr. Gaines," he said, extending his hand, "I cannot adequately express my apologies for what occurred today." Howard accepted the handshake with visible discomfort. "No apology necessary, Mr. Secretary. It was a simple misunderstanding." "It was a failure of the system I oversee," the secretary replied firmly, "and an insult to your service." Before Howard could protest further, the secretary guided him toward the stage. The crowd had fallen silent, watching the interaction with rapt attention. Among them, Howard noticed the well-dressed man who had dismissed him as an attention seeker, now looking distinctly uncomfortable. As they climbed the steps to the stage, Howard whispered, "Sir, this really isn't necessary. I was just doing my job that day." "So was I," the secretary replied quietly. "In Kandahar 2010, I know what it means to run toward danger while others run away." He paused at the top of the steps. "And I know what it means to want to leave the memories behind." Something in his tone made Howard look up sharply, seeing understanding in the younger man's eyes. The secretary returned to the podium, gesturing for Howard to join him. "Ladies and gentlemen, I have the distinct honor of introducing Mr. Howard Gaines." On September 11, 2001, Mr. Gaines was serving as a civilian intelligence analyst in the Naval Command Center, mere yards from the impact site. Howard stood uncomfortably beside the podium as the secretary continued, detailing actions he had never spoken of outside of his official report. The 7 trips into smoke-filled corridors, the junior officers he had guided to safety, the moment when, despite a serious back injury, he had returned for one final sweep and found a trapped communications specialist. "Mr. Gaines has never sought recognition," the secretary said. "In fact, I suspect he would rather not be standing here now, but some debts must be acknowledged even decades later." The captain approached with the small box, which she handed to the secretary. He opened it to reveal a medal on a blue ribbon. The Distinguished Civilian Service Medal is the highest honor the Department of Defense can bestow upon a civilian employee, the secretary explained. It has been awarded only 27 times since September 11, 2001. Today, it will be awarded for actions taken on that very day. As the secretary prepared to place the medal around Howard's neck, a commotion arose from the front row. A woman in her 40s had stood up, tears streaming down her face. "Mr. Gaines," she called out, her voice breaking with emotion. "Howard Gaines?" The secretary paused, medal in hand, as the woman made her way toward the stage. Security personnel moved to intercept her, but the secretary raised his hand, signaling them to allow her approach. "I'm Jennifer Whitman," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Lieutenant Junior Grade Jennifer Morse back then, Naval Communications." Howard's expression shifted from confusion to stunned recognition. The young sailor he had carried out, her face had been covered in soot, her uniform torn and bloodied. He had never learned her name or what became of her after the medical teams took over. "You're the communications specialist," he said softly. Jennifer nodded, tears flowing freely now. "For 24 years, I've been trying to find you. They told me you were just another first responder. They didn't even have your name." Her voice broke. "I've been at every anniversary ceremony hoping I might see you." The secretary gestured for her to join them on stage. As she climbed the steps, Howard noticed she walked with a slight limp, a permanent reminder of that day. "You carried me out when the secondary collapse started," she continued. "The doctors said I would have died from smoke inhalation if I'd been trapped even 5 more minutes." The audience was completely silent, collectively holding their breath at this unexpected reunion. "I have 3 children who wouldn't exist if not for you," Jennifer said. "My oldest daughter is named Heidi, after the letter H on your name badge. It was all I could see through the smoke." Howard's stoic composure finally cracked. He remembered her now, the young sailor pinned beneath a fallen cabinet, barely conscious when he had found her. "You told me to think about coming home to my family," Jennifer continued. "You said, 'Picture their faces. Don't you dare give up on them.' Those words kept me going through 16 surgeries and 2 years of rehabilitation." The secretary stepped forward with the medal. "Mr. Gaines, on behalf of a grateful nation, it is my profound honor to present you with the Distinguished Civilian Service Medal." As the medal was placed around his neck, the audience rose in a standing ovation. Howard stood rigidly, uncomfortable with the attention, yet deeply moved by Jennifer's presence. When the applause finally subsided, the secretary invited Howard to speak. He approached the microphone with visible reluctance. "I'm not one for speeches," he began, his voice rough with emotion. "What happened that day? What happened to all of us? There aren't really words for it. I don't consider what I did heroic. Anyone in that building would have done the same. Many did more and never came home." Howard glanced at Jennifer. "Seeing Lieutenant Whitman here, knowing she's built a life, had children, that's the only recognition I ever needed." He touched the medal briefly. "This belongs to everyone who was there that day, those who survived and those who didn't." As Howard stepped back from the podium, the captain who had turned him away approached, her expression contrite. "Sir, I need to personally apologize for the disrespect you experienced. It was unforgivable. You were doing your job, Captain. Security protocols exist for good reasons. Not to exclude heroes, sir. No, I'm just a retired analyst who had a very bad day at work 24 years ago," Howard replied with a hint of dry humor. As the ceremony continued, Howard was escorted to a seat in the front row with Jennifer beside him. The well-dressed man who had dismissed Howard earlier approached during a musical interlude. "Mr. Gaines, I owe you an apology. My comment in the line was completely out of line." Howard accepted the handshake with a nod, but said nothing. After the ceremony, Howard found himself surrounded by officials and former colleagues. The Director of Naval Intelligence approached with a senior Pentagon official. "Mr. Gaines, we've only just learned about the security incident," the director said. "Rest assured, there will be a thorough review of our procedures." "That's really not necessary," Howard replied. "It was a simple oversight." "It was a systemic failure," the Pentagon official corrected firmly. "And it makes me wonder how many other heroes we've overlooked or forgotten." Howard found himself in a quiet moment with Jennifer and her family. Her eldest daughter, Heidi, embraced him with tears in her eyes. "My mother told me stories about you my entire life," she said. "She made sure we knew that life is precious and can change in an instant." The secretary rejoined them. "Mr. Gaines, there's something else we need to discuss if you're willing. It's about your medical complications since 2001. Howard stiffened slightly. With all due respect, I didn't come here seeking benefits. Refusing care you've earned doesn't help anyone, the secretary countered gently, and it might prevent us from understanding the long-term effects on first responders. Jennifer touched Howard's arm. He's right. I struggled with the same feelings, like I didn't deserve help when others suffered more. Howard looked away, uncomfortable with how accurately her words described his own feelings. For years, he had minimized his injuries, telling himself others had sacrificed more. We have a special unit that handles cases like yours, the secretary continued. Would you at least speak with them? Jennifer squeezed his arm. Please, for those of us you saved. It was the genuine concern in her eyes that finally broke through Howard's resistance. He nodded slowly. I'll talk to them. As the grounds emptied, Howard found himself standing alone at the Pentagon Memorial. The stone benches, each representing a life lost that day, cast long shadows in the late afternoon sun. Mr. Gaines, a voice called softly. Howard turned to see a young military police officer. Sir, my uncle was in the building that day. He always said some anonymous guy in a suit led them to safety when all the lights went out. I don't know if that was you, but thank you, sir, for whatever you did that day. What's your name, son? Howard asked the young officer. Specialist Michael Brennan, sir. Your uncle, is he still with us? Yes, sir. Retired last year. He's the reason I enlisted. Howard smiled slightly. I'm glad for both of you. He didn't confirm whether he had been the one to help. In truth, that day had become a blur of faces and voices. Would you mind if I walked with you for a bit, sir? The specialist asked. Security details my assignment today, but my shift just ended. Howard nodded, and they moved slowly through the memorial, their footsteps quiet against the stone path. I grew up hearing about 9/11, the specialist said. But being here, at this memorial, with someone who lived through it, it's different. It becomes real, Howard said simply. Yes, sir, that's exactly it. They paused at one of the benches. Howard placed his hand on the cool stone, remembering a colleague who had sat 2 desks away, always first in the office, coffee already brewed when Howard arrived. Did you know them, sir? The people who didn't make it out? Howard nodded. Not all, but many. They were more than names on a memorial. They had favorite coffee mugs, birthday celebrations, photos of their kids on their desks. As they continued walking, Howard noticed the captain who had rejected him earlier, standing near the exit. She seemed to be waiting, her posture rigid with military precision. When they approached, she stepped forward. Mr. Gaines, if I could have one more moment of your time. Howard nodded, and the specialist discreetly moved a few paces away. Sir, I wanted to apologize again, she began. Captain, you've already... No, sir, please, she interrupted. This isn't just about following protocols. When you tried to explain who you were, I didn't just dismiss you. I doubted you. That was wrong, and it reflects a larger problem in how we treat veterans and civilian heroes. Her candor surprised Howard. What's your name, Captain? Rebecca Hartman, sir. Captain Hartman, have you served in combat zones? 3 tours in Afghanistan, sir. Howard studied her face, seeing the subtle signs of someone who had seen things that couldn't be unseen. Then you understand something most people don't. The ones who talk the most about what they did usually did the least. She nodded slowly. And the real heroes rarely talk about it at all. I wouldn't go that far, Howard said, but in my experience, the act itself is often enough. The recognition... He touched the medal now hanging around his neck. It's complicated. Sir, I'd like to make this right, Captain Hartman said. I'm the head of security for these ceremonies. I'd like to institute a new verification protocol specifically for 9/11 responders. If you'd be willing to consult, "I'm just one old man, Captain," Howard interrupted gently, "but if you think it would help, I'd be glad to share my thoughts." She handed him a card. "Thank you, sir." As Captain Hartman departed, Howard was surprised to see Jennifer approaching again, this time alone. "I hoped I might catch you before you left," she said. "My family's waiting at the car, but I wanted to ask, would you consider joining us for dinner? Nothing formal, just a chance to really talk." Howard hesitated. For years, he had avoided discussing that day, preferring to lock the memories away. But seeing Jennifer, alive and well with a family of her own, had awakened something he had long suppressed, a need for connection with someone who understood. "I'd like that," he said finally. As they walked toward the parking area, Jennifer asked, "Does it feel different now, having the recognition after all these years?" Howard considered the question carefully. "When they turned me away at security, I felt invisible, like maybe what I did didn't matter after all." He paused. It wasn't about wanting recognition. It was about being denied the chance to remember with others who were there. Jennifer nodded in understanding. "For years, I searched for you because I needed to say thank you, but I realized later it was also because you were the only one who saw me at my most vulnerable moment and gave me strength instead of pity." They reached the parking lot where Jennifer's family waited. Before joining them, she turned to Howard once more. "When I was in the hospital, a psychiatrist told me something I've never forgotten. He said that trauma divides people into three groups: those who were there, those who watched from a distance, and those who can never truly understand. Finding you again feels like closing a circle that's been open for 24 years. Howard felt a tightness in his throat. "For me too," he managed to say. As they approached Jennifer's family, Howard felt the weight of the medal against his chest. It represented not just what he had done that day, but the recognition of a truth he had long denied to himself, that his actions had mattered, that they continued to matter, and that allowing others to acknowledge this truth didn't diminish the sacrifices of those who had given more. The Secretary of Defense, preparing to leave in his official vehicle, spotted Howard and approached one final time. "Mr. Gaines," he said, extending his hand, "I hope today has in some small way helped correct a long-standing oversight." "It has, Mr. Secretary," Howard replied, his voice steady. "Though the greatest gift wasn't the medal." The Secretary smiled in understanding, glancing at Jennifer and her family. "The connections that survive, that endure despite everything, those are what truly matter." As the sun began to set over the Pentagon, Howard joined Jennifer's family in their car. For the first time in many years, the weight of memory felt not like a burden to be carried alone, but like a shared history, painful, profound, but no longer isolating. The specialist watched them leave, then turned back toward the memorial. One day, he thought, he would have stories of his own service to tell, and he hoped he would tell them with the same quiet dignity as the old hero he had met today.